I think setting is what's most important. A child, in order for them to open up, they have to feel safe in that setting. So if you were to ask a child in a new setting how they're feeling, they're probably more guarded because they're thinking about their certain environment more than what they're actually feeling. But if it's in the comfort of their own home with with their favorite toy in hand or something like that, it's like they have control of their environment, then it's a lot easier for parents to get children to open up.
Hey there! Thank you for tuning in to Chats with Hannah. Today we're going to be talking about how we as parents can really build on our communication skills with our children. Now, you're not alone if you feel like you're trying to communicate something but they don't seem to understand, or they keep making the same mistakes over and over, or you just lose your mind, you're frustrated, or your child is upset and you don't know how to calm them down in that process. You know what? We're all in this together. So today we have Cheryl Jacobs, who's a marriage and family therapist, and she will walk us through various scenarios and help us gain more insight into how we can communicate to our kids. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today, Cheryl.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right. Would you tell us, before we begin, would you tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I am a wife of almost 17 years. I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a little girl, ages 14, 11, and soon to be 5-year-old. And I'm also a marriage and family therapist, and I've been working in this field for almost 12 years now.
Yeah. That's lovely. We're actually looking forward to all the insights that you're going to bring to us today. Mm-hmm. So as we talk about this topic, on how do we communicate as parents, how do we communicate with our children, right? Because that is so important, and yet there is so much that gets missed out, right? And how do we do it correctly, or how do we engage with our kids so they're able to listen to us? Because so many times we might feel like we're hitting this wall, right? We're not getting through, and I'm sure the kids are feeling the same way, that we're not understanding of them, right? So how do we build this connection? How do we build a two-way communication process between us and the kids and us, right? So to begin with, my first question is, could you elaborate on what are open-ended conversations? Yeah. What does that mean?
So open-ended conversations would include questions, asking children questions like, instead of asking them, hey, how was your day today? Their response would be more like, fine, good, it's okay, that kind of response. But asking them very specific questions that will make them think and to expand a little bit more. Like, what was the best part of your day today? Or what is something that made you laugh today? Who did you sit with at school? Questions like that will make them, it's not so routine, but it feels like, oh, I have to actually think about what is being asked to me, and then I can respond. So the more ask any kind of creative questions that's a little more specific, though, that's the best way to kind of have a conversation with a child.
Yeah. And what is closed-ended, or what is more instructional sort of conversations?
Yeah, closed-ended would be anything that would prompt them to respond with the yes or no answer. Yes, fine, like it's just one worded kind of response, Instructional would be, so let's say it's a child between 4 to 10, right? And it all depends on the situation, what's going on, kind of preparing them, giving them instructions on how to handle a situation. So we've talked before about children who are socially anxious, especially during this pandemic. A lot of younger children are not used to being exposed, in a social setting, that they are a little more anxious and fearful of stepping into something new. So it would be helpful if a parent was to prepare them for that by just saying, hey, we're going to go to this person's house, and this is what we'll be expecting. There's going to be this many number of people. We're going to be eating together, or we're going to be doing this together. So a child is a little bit more prepared on what to expect. And sometimes it's also helpful if a child is informed if they're fearful of pets, letting them know if there's a pet also in a home, so they're not guarded and fearful also, just kind of preparing them emotionally. And another thing is, if a child is already prepared for that, it is helpful to help a child to take the focus off of that setting by giving them something else to think on. Like, so I usually tell my kids, hey, when we walk away, I want you to learn 3 new things about your friend, or 3 new things around this area, about the home, about the family, or anything when we leave from their home. So they're focused more on learning those 3 new things instead of how they're feeling in that moment of that setting.
Yeah. And I think that's really key, because even like a lot of conversations that I've been having with parents is that, their kids are finding it a little challenging to be out there.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, because of this whole situation, right? And I think that it's important, like you mentioned, to sometimes not focus on their behavior that solely, but to see like how we can support them and help them in the process, but also understand, like, give them more grace in this time, right? And be able to like you said, like, divert the attention to something else with like, hey, can you tell me 5 maybe new things that you see in that person's house? Or if we go to a park, or if we go to, an open space, can you name some things? Can you see the colors out there? But like sort of getting them away from what they're feeling like, right, in that moment. That's really good. Thank you. So let's take this for example, right? Like, even a socially, like a child who's feeling social anxiety as they go out, right? And maybe you've prepped them for it. And let's say they still feel that shyness, or, maybe even the child's personality is more introverted, right? So how can we use open-ended questions in that setting to draw out, like, to just converse with the child and understand what they're going through, and maybe like even give them some insights into that situation?
Yeah, I think setting is what's most important. A child, in order for them to open up, they have to feel safe in that setting. So if you were to ask a child in a new setting how they're feeling, they're probably more guarded because they're thinking about their environment more than what they're actually feeling. But if it's in the comfort of their own home with with their favorite toy in hand or something like that, it's like they have control of their environment, then it's a lot easier for parents to get children to open up. But asking them to identify things, something like, tell me something that made you happy today, or, tell me something that made you smile. What made you laugh today? Just little things like that to kind of get them to open up a little bit more, and it's fun. Like with the older kids, I do this more with the older kids. Like I always ask my kids to get them to talk a little bit more. I ask them what if questions, like just throw random stuff like what if this happened, what would you do, and just to kind of see how their thought processing is. And with my younger one, I don't ask that as much because she doesn't have as much exposure to the world. My older ones do, a little bit more compared to my younger one. So it just depends, just to kind of get them to see, just as a parent, to see what's going on in their mind by asking them random questions and making it fun. And you also answering it too, instead of it just, otherwise it sounds so like an interrogation, like making it fun, like by even saying, I remember when I used to feel scared when this happened. And so that way children are able to connect with you, when we also open up, because we're also human and they need to know that, that to embrace their humanness too.
Yeah, I think that's really key. Thanks, Cheryl. So my next question is, how do we be more conversational in daily routine activities, right? Because sometimes we may feel like we're going through the day and it's like a bunch of instructions, right? Like, you have to do this, you have to get up, you have to have your breakfast, come on now, you have to sit for school, or come on now, you have to dress up and you have to eat, or just there's so many to-do things.
Yeah.
But in these mundane activities, like, how can we be more conversational with kids?
Yeah, so I think routine is important and structure is very important in a child's life. Like it's a good thing that there is an order, from the time you wake up to the time you sleep. There's going to be a lot of in-between stuff, but conversations along the way would just be casual talks and saying, so it could be, what are you excited about today? I think to engage with the child, they just need to feel like you care more than just the structure and the routine, that we're also engaged in their just daily life, like what are your plans for today? What are you going to be doing? Like, and it all depends on the age range. When the younger they are, the more structure needs to be there and routine needs to be there, because it's just setting them up for better adulting, in the future. So, but along the way, it's good to have conversations along the way, and when they come home from school or what, let them just see this is a normal part of family life is we talk, we talk about our feelings, we talk about what's going on instead of just marking that thing off the list, it needs to be, this is just part of life. And just having regular conversations, like what was the best part of your day? Or if you have younger children, it's just a matter of just doing things, getting the task done, but along the way, making it fun on the car ride and just having conversations with the child, instead of just getting to point A to point B, but having conversations come alive in the car too. You could do that.
Yeah, car, rickshaw, bus, if someone. Yeah, I think that is so. I think like what even struck out to me is that sometimes we may be too quick to react or respond to things, right? But actually drawing out conversations with kids is a lot about listening to them and understanding them, right? Because they may say things that maybe, even they have not like fully processed, or, just this random things or even bizarre things sometimes, but to just be able to listen to them so they don't feel like they can't talk because they're going to get a reaction from us, maybe a negative reaction, right? Mostly. What do you think about that?
They're fearful of our reaction, of our negative.
Yeah, about being slow to react and quicker to listen.
Okay, if a parent finds themselves parent needs to be self-aware, of their own emotion, of their own mood and all that stuff. Like if a parent is agitated, frustrated, grumpy after a long day of work, and then the child comes and asks, and if you're responding with just being mean, it's not the child's words or actions that irritated you. You came in with that demeanor, so the child will pick up on that. So I think parent needs to be very aware of what they're feeling at that moment. If they're irritable, frustrated, and that happens, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's okay to just take like a 10-minute breather, or before you're about to open that front door and just get in to your home, if you need to like take like a few minutes, a few laps around your place, or whatever, to just decompress just for a few minutes before you enter your home, because your children are picking up on that. They're going to see that. Yeah. So I think parents just need to be a little bit more aware of how they are feeling, what they're feeling in that moment. And if they need to relax and decompress, let them do it, but they need to communicate that with the child and say, hey, I had a long day. I really want to hang out with you, or I really want to talk to you, but just can you give me like 15 minutes? And that's okay with the child to tell them that, because parents can communicate. It's okay to have space when they're feeling emotionally charged.
So my next question is, how can we be more inviting and motivating, like especially when there's a to-do list, right? Because there's so many things that need to get done so that, like we can get out of the house in time, or the kids need to sit for their school, just like so many things, right? And oftentimes we find kids not wanting to do it, or like wanting to like sit back a little more. And so how can we sound more motivating and inviting in those times?
Yeah. So when it comes to work, I think even adults struggle with that, right? Like we are not even motivated. But I think the one thing that I've learned is that children pick up the motivation or lack of motivation by observing the parents' attitude towards work. So children will associate things based on how parents respond. So for example, if a parent comes home exhausted and grumpy and frustrated after a long day of traffic or long meetings, children are going to think, oh, that's work does not sound fun, because that's what they're going to associate it with the parents' attitude and feelings of work. But I'm not even saying that the parents should wake up and get all excited about it, but in a way that they're modeling that work is necessary, but it should be communicated in a way that's healthy, that a child can pick up and say, hey, this is what we're supposed to be doing. But yeah, it could be hard, but it all depends on how the parent's attitude is and how they're communicating that to the child. Like there are also parents that I've walked with in counseling and stuff where parents are checked out when they come home. They don't want to engage with the child. So children are going to associate work as something that is not going to be interesting because it wears them out. And work is taking my parents away from me, or stuff like that is what's communicated to a child. They're not going to enjoy it. And so in order to make it fun, and I mean, children should be taught at an early age, like basic chores, like making their own bed. I'm a firm believer they need to wash their own clothes, do help around the house. And I know that with help provided in India, it's not always, but basic things they should be taught, but that's just the way we raise our kids, but I think that's important because you're teaching them work ethics by little, by little things that's expected of them, and they need to complete it, whatever is asked of them. And depending on what is expected, you can give them incentives, like giving them extra playtime, or it could be, monetary stuff like money or whatever it is, little things that there is something that they're looking forward to, and always acknowledge them for what they do. Just like any adult, we want to be noticed for when we put in hard work. We want to be acknowledged that when we're working, that we're valued for what we do. Children needs to be appreciated. Like even if it's something that's like making their bed, they need to get a high five and say, hey, thanks for listening. Thanks for making your bed. You did a great job today. Little things like that actually motivates them to want to do more.
Yeah. And I like what you said. And also I feel like even with the routine things that they need to do, right? Whether it's brushing their teeth or eating their own food, and all of it can be like, can we make that motivating as well? Like just the routine things that they have to do.
Motivating. I think it's like kids need to, we need to pay attention to what they do and not what they don't do. So it's little things like if they were asked to pick up their toys and they did it the first time, like, hey, go clean up your toys, and they actually did it the first time, instead of dismissing it, just saying, hey, I'm so proud of you, thanks so much for cleaning up, you did such a great job. And like even for the younger kids, something I would suggest is making it fun, because younger kids, it's harder for their attention and they don't think about those things, but making it fun and saying like, okay, I'm going to count to 10 and let's see how many of us can pick up the toys as fast as we can. And so it will be more fun that things are getting done, and it's also fun for them. Or let's say that, like if there's multiple children in the home, and saying, okay, everyone pick up 5 toys, and just look around and pick up those toys and put it in the basket or wherever. So it just depends on the age range and what it is. I think most important is that children are seen for what they do. For first time obedience, give them a high five, or like reward them, or saying, hey, I even acknowledge, hey, thanks for listening the first time. I really appreciate that. That makes them want to do it more often, the more we acknowledge it.
Yeah, I think that's something that really stands out. Like, do appreciate them for what they do too, because sometimes it just seems like the not done list is longer, right? But like all of us, we put in our hard work, and we know, the effort that goes into it. And I'm sure they feel that too.
Yes.
So now we will talk about more of like the emotion part of kids, right? And how they process it, and how can we help them process it. So my first question is, when a child is upset about something, whether their favorite toy has broken, or they want something and their friend is not sharing it with them, or just they're feeling this upset, they're feeling upset or frustrated about something, how can we lead them in that time?
Yeah. If they're frustrated for something like a toy broken or anything, I think acknowledging their emotion, and saying, hey, but saying out the word out loud is very important. Like, so instead of like, sometimes as parents, we just know when our kids are upset, and we address the issue without saying, hey, I can tell that you're frustrated right now. So they're able to know, oh, this is what frustration means, or I can tell that you were disappointed when this happened. I think when children respond through crying or frustration, and it always manifests in anger. Anger is like a big umbrella, and under that is all these other emotions like disappointment, frustration, resentment, jealousy, or sadness, shows up in anger. Like it all depends on what it is, as a parent, to help them define that specific emotion. And so instead of saying, hey, you seem angry right now, it's not necessarily anger, but it could be something deeper. Like they're really sad, that their favorite toy was broken, or they're really upset, or even upset is kind of a broader word, like you seem frustrated because things are not happening. Try to help them define that specific emotion word instead of just saying angry or sad, or, like those bigger words that it's easily relatable to anyone, but defining that specific one. That would be helpful. And if in that moment, if a child is throwing a tantrum and they're obviously not going to listen in that moment, just telling them in that moment, hey, you seem really frustrated right now. I want to talk about this, but you let me know when you're ready to talk about it. And then you just walk away, let them cool off. Children always will cool off, and they want you to get sucked into their frustration too, but that's not going to help, because parents feel helpless and then they get frustrated at the child because the child is not calming down. So the best thing to do is remove yourself from that setting and saying, hey, we're going to come back and talk about this, but let me know when you're ready to talk about it. And so once the child, honestly, the children forget about it after a while, and depending on their age and what the situation is, but most of the time they end up forgetting about it. Revisit that conversation where they can actually think and process things in a little bit more, in a clearer way, by saying, hey, what happened there? And then they open up a little bit more. They really do, when they're saying, I was sad. Why do you think you were sad? And because my favorite toy broke, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry that your favorite toy, I know that meant a lot to you. Just acknowledging what they're feeling is the best thing to do. What I'd say not to do is, anytime things don't go their way, don't appease them just to make them happy by giving them what they want. Please don't do that, because it's just setting them up to always feel entitled to have what they want when they want it. So if anything, walk away from it. As a parent, we want to fix our kids' problem right then and there, but the best thing you can do for them in this moment, in this season, is to walk away from it and process what was happening in the moment.
Thanks, Cheryl. So I think that brings me to my next question, where you talked about labeling what they are feeling, right? And so they sort of are aware of how they are feeling. Is there some resources, or just like you said, the umbrella is anger, but there is like different emotions under it, right? Is there something that parents can look up or read about that would help them understand it?
Not necessarily. I created one. I just made one for my clients whenever. I can just send that to you if you want. There's nothing specific that's out there, at least not that I know of. But I just made one, like a sheet, where to help the child to recognize their emotion. Sometimes it's just like a stick figure or like a little cartoon face, like which one do you think you're feeling right now? And it all depends, on what it is. But I put something together, but I can just send that to you if you would like.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
Sure.
So then that brings me to my next question, which is, how do we help kids identify these different emotions, right? Especially when their vocabulary is so limited, like especially if we talk about like the 4 and 5 year olds, or even kids younger than that, 3-year-olds, where they're sort of understanding, but they don't have the vocabulary yet. Mm-hmm. So how do we help them identify it and like sort of process it?
With the younger kids, really sitting down with them on eye level, and sometimes even parents need to be aware of their posture when they are talking to a child. But if you were to like make eye contact, like getting on your knees and making eye contact with them, the child, if you're trumping over them, the kids will feel a little more like a little more scared or nervous to open up. But if you're an eye level there, or even below, would actually would be best, where the child can open up a little bit more. That would be good. That's one thing I'd say, is pay attention to your body language, how you are coming across to the child, and your tone needs to be also lowered to where that they can match your tone. They will match your tone. Two, I think to help them identify some of the emotions is just as a parent, they need to be aware of what that child is feeling. Like I said before, like where if a child is angry or frustrated, help them define clearly identify what that specific emotion would be. If it is sadness, it could be more than that. And what the situation is, they could be sad because a friend moved away, or they could be sad because they didn't get what they wanted. It could be whatever it is. Help them know the situation very well before you help the child identify what it is. And instead of saying like, you seem angry, well, it sounds like, you may be disappointed that this is what's happening, so you're introducing them to new vocabulary too, to new emotion related vocab that would help them to know, oh, this is what I'm feeling. Next time when they experience this, they are able to say, I'm actually feeling disappointed. Like they're able to recognize that. And it takes time, it takes practice, and no child is going to figure these big words out in such a short time. It's going to, through time and consistency from the parent, is what's going to help them to be able to identify their emotion.
Yeah, and I feel like even as you're saying it, it sets the premises, or it sets the foundation to build on, right? Because I did read a few researches, but I think you can share with us better on like children who are able to label their emotions or be able to express their emotions healthily are able to self-soothe themselves faster as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think EQ is what emotional intelligence is something that parents have to do more on in this generation. Like I know the older generation, or even my generation, it was more focused on education, academics, and doing well. That's all very, very important. However, we also need to bring in the EQ part of it too, to identify what's going on with them, because that's what's really going to form their character and form their personality and empathy, and all those things is what you're teaching them. That's far more important than just making great marks. Like both are important, but even teaching a child to have very well self-aware is so important at such a young age. And I believe studies have shown that the higher the EQ, the better social skills that they have. Like better work performance. It's not tied down to just, they're more relatable, more approachable. Just things like that. It just teaches them when they have a better EQ. But honestly, it even raises their confidence they know how to communicate. They're not scared of how they're perceived or anything, because they're aware of who they are. They're secure in who they are.
Let's go to the next part, right? Where we're talking about their identity. Now, we know that kids really want, like we spoke about it earlier, but they really want to please us, right? And they want our approval. And most often, their approval is tied into their performance, right? So, and they most likely take approval as love, right? So they're loved if they do well, if they clean their room, if they don't throw any tantrums, if, so and so. But as parents, how do we communicate that, even through their mistakes, or even when they don't, like how can we sort of bring that to them, that we love them, and their approval of us, like our approval of them, is not based on their performance, but hey, yeah, you need to do all these things and we want you to excel in what you do. But how do we tie that in?
Yeah, honestly, that's simple. It's just telling them that, what you just said. It's just saying, hey, I don't love you because you're making good grades. I don't love you. Obviously, as a parent, we are grateful and we're so happy acknowledging that, but just telling them that, we love you for you because you're my son, you're my daughter, telling them that and reminding them of that. You're creating that emotional safety net for the children, when you are constantly affirming them and loving on them, and telling when they do make a mistake, walk with them through that and say, hey, you, and obviously as parents, we would want to scold them or, be very upset for what they did. And it all depends on what it is, but I think it's important that children need to just simply be told, I am so proud of you, or I'm so grateful that you're mine. Just hearing things like that is what really helps children to feel more safe and secure in the home. I think that's actually rather simple. It's actually just telling them that. And definitely like anytime they do well in school and stuff, that's also definitely giving them a high five and praising them for what they do. And even if it's like, I think parents also need to stop and pay attention when a child works so hard in studying for a test, and let's say they didn't do that well, but acknowledging that they tried so hard. That's just so important. Hey, I'm so proud of you that you worked so hard. That's what matters to me more than what you ended up getting on that grade. Just paying attention to those details and noticing it and saying it out loud to them is so, so important.
So, no matter how, like, we all want to love our kids, right? We don't wake up in the morning thinking that, hey, we want to shout at our kids today, or we want to get upset with them, but we do. Like, there are things that happen and we are upset or we are frustrated, and might not be directly at the kids, but there's so many other things happening, and it sort of just comes out on the kids. But in those times, how do we as parents healthily process it? And even in our frustration, like, how do we communicate healthily to our kids?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think every parent is guilty of this, right? Including myself. Like, I think it's self-aware. Parents have to be self-aware. And living in a fast-paced city, or a culture that it's about go, go, go. Who cares about what you feel? Let's just keep going. We just have to keep going. That's not helpful. If the parent needs to be aware of what they're feeling. If they're in an irritable mood or frustrated, even when they just wake up and they're just not in a good mood for whatever it is, they need to find ways to not just cope is not the word, maybe finding ways to help them to decompress or process that before they interact with their children. Because if they know that the children is the thing that throws them off the edge, in that moment of frustration, they need to step back a little bit, even before they open their bedroom door or whatever it is. Just taking a deep breath and just saying, just take a moment where you can collect your thoughts before you go out. That's the best thing that a parent can do in that moment. And it also, if it's a ongoing issue that it happens every morning, then they need to talk about it with someone on what's going on. But the most important thing is the parent needs to be very self-aware on that they're even feeling what they're feeling, and not react in the moment. Yeah, and it's okay to tell the children, like, if you are in the middle of the day, everything was fine, but something threw you off and you're just in an irritable mood, tell your child, hey, I just need to take a 5-minute break. Just give me a few minutes if that's okay. And mommy wants to be present with you. I really want to listen and do what, saying all of that, but let them know that you're just going to take a few-minute break just to collect your thoughts or take a few-minute breather. And that's totally fine. I think the children actually need to hear that from you instead of just going to the room, locking it, because then children are going to be wondering, where did mom go? Let the children know that mom needs a break just for a few minutes, 5, 10, however long you need, but communicate that to the children, because the parent is also communicating to the children that it's okay to take a break when you need to take a break. You need to pause when you need to pause. Put that pause button. It's okay to do that. So it's teaching them practical ways to create healthy rhythms for themselves.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think, since I try to do it myself as well, and I know that in the beginning, it's hard for the child to even come to that, be able to understand that, right? They're not able to understand. So they're keeping on coming into your space, and you just need that space to just but I think after a while, after consistently doing it, they sort of get some idea, right? Even as they grow older and they're able to see a rhythm happening, and obviously, maybe giving them an activity to do while you can take your break as well, right? Because for young kids, it's hard for them to even understand that or be able to. But I think that's, as we keep doing it consistently, they're able to get a better understanding of it.
Yeah. And one other thing I'd like to add on that is so important that parents take ownership of when they lose it with their child. Please apologize to the child, saying, hey, I'm sorry that I yelled at you when I shouldn't have. I'm sorry I overreacted, or I'm sorry mama lost her cool. Whatever it is, let the child know that the more the parents model apologies or deep remorse for what they did, the more the children will be willing to do it. So make sure that anytime, it's okay. I mean, I don't want parents to feel guilty for when they lose, get upset, because you're human, and it is it's hard raising kids, so it's expected. But model what apologies look like, and like saying, hey, I am so sorry. I can't tell you how many times a day I apologize to my kids, because as a mom, it is hard. And even as a dad, it's hard, but saying, I'm so sorry that I lost it. I was just having a really bad day, or this was in the back of my mind. We talk about all of this stuff in our home, where if I'm having a bad day, I'll tell my kids, I'm having a really bad day. I thought this is what's going to happen, but instead this happened. That's why I'm really upset today. So forgive me if I say things that I shouldn't say, or, forgive me. So I kind of prepare my kids for that too, or if I'm anxious about something, like I'm anticipating on something, and I involve my kids in that. I'm saying, I'm really hoping this is what's going to happen, but so just hang with me if I'm not all there, and my kids have so much more grace for me when I explain it to them. Even my 5-year-old, she even has so much, so she knows too, once I communicate that to her in a way that she understands, obviously.
Yeah. And I think that as we model it out, they pick up on it, like you said, right? And then they are able to then sort of emulate it as well, because they're watching us do it, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, everything is going to be learned behavior, everything into their adulthood. Everything that they do is taught from their family of origin, which is us, so whatever we want them to however we want their future adulting life looks like, we need to start now in order for them to live that life out.
So the next question is, when kids make the same mistake over and over, even after you've told them like so many times, how do we approach kids in that situation? Like, how do we still lovingly and healthily communicate with them?
Man, I think that depends on what the mistake is, and how it forms their character. That's the other thing, so if it is, let's say it's work related, I'm going to give a really lame example. Like if I told them to pick up the clothes off the floor. I mean, I have preteens and teenager at home, so that's what I'm dealing with. It's cleaning up after themselves, their room and stuff. So if it's like basic stuff in their home, in their room, I'm sorry, if it's not done the first time, we have consequences in our home, so knowing what is that thing that would bother them the most if you took it away from them, like for them, it may be a video game, or no TV, or playing outside, whatever it is, works for your child, when they make a mistake, and if it's a character issue, I would make them really process that a lot, like if you have a child that repeatedly lies, which I've heard so many times, lying, it forms their character, right? Like if it's not addressed at a young age, who knows what that adult it could lead into, so parents need to be on top of any character issues, like if it's like not being loyal, or something that's even overlooked is gossip, if a child is, talking bad about another friend, in a way that's not helpful, which I've heard several times, parents need to address that, saying, hey, it sounds like, that's an unfair thing, that you are saying about your friend, or whatever it is. It all depends on what the situation is. For younger children, if they make the same mistake over and over, it's usually younger children, it's more related to tasks around the house, or delayed obedience. When parent asks them to do something and it's not done, there needs to be consequences. But know your child well enough to where what works for them. Like if it is timeout, if it is spanking, if it is sentences, if it's taking away a privilege, or whatever it is. If that makes sense, it all depends on the age, what the circumstance is, and if it's a character issue is what I would focus on. If it's more task stuff, it's easier to overlook those things, but there's easier consequences that you could give if it was more normal kid stuff, like picking up their toys and not, there's consequences that's easier to do. But if it's a character issue, man, I would even make them write sentences, look up the word, what do you think, if a child is aggressive and repeatedly being aggressive, they need to be aware of the parent. Let's say they're about to step into a setting where there's several children, and there is a repeated pattern of a child hitting another kid. the parent needs to prepare the child and say, hey, we're going to go into this setting and there's going to be a bunch of play date and there's going to be a bunch of kids there. If at any time you get aggressive by hitting them or anything, this is what's going to happen. Let the child know in advance. And also preparing them, if a child is aggressive, also telling them, if you find yourself getting really angry at a child, I want you to find me immediately. Come and to me instead of reacting to it. And so come find mom, let me know that I'm right here. I'm watching you, and so come talk to me about it right then. Who did what? So I'll take care of it. And make sure, just little steps like that, acknowledge them and give them a high five. Thanks so much for coming to me, because I know that was really hard and you wanted to probably hit them or whatever, but praise them for the fact that they came to you and they followed through on the instruction that you gave them. So in little things like that, that's really important to pay attention, acknowledge what they do. And so if it's aggression with younger children, it needs to be addressed, but prepare them what they're stepping into and let them know a way out before, instead of just telling them, hey, don't hit your friend, but tell them what another option would be. Hey, I need you to walk away if you're really upset. If a friend is being mean to you, I need you to come find me, or find an adult, another mom or another dad who's around you, or a teacher. Things like that. Give them a solution to what they could do instead of, because that's the only response that they know is just hitting that friend or whatever. Give them another option.
Yes, I think that's a really important one. How important is it to include kids in big decision making, right? Like, for example, like when we move houses or change cities. When a new baby is going to be arriving, like these are huge major transitions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes we as adults make decisions and kids have to follow through. But is it important to include them in decision making? And if so, how can we do that?
Yes, I do believe that, because it's a family decision. It's a family change, right? A transition that involves the entire family. When we moved here from the US to come here to India, I prepared my kids for about 1.5 years and let them know this is the plan, this is why we're going. And I just helped them through process. I actually created a journal for my kids and for individually, and I had specific questions on there every day. They had to answer it, but I think it's really, I'm not saying that any parent needs to do that, but that's what worked for me, but helping a child know in advance, hey, this is what we're going to be doing, and what do you think about that? What is something that you're looking forward to in our new home? Or what are you looking forward to in this new change? What is something that you're hesitant about? What are you fearful of? Process that with them, let them know, because otherwise they're stepping into a setting where it's like, does my opinion matter? Or a setting where they're fearful of not knowing what the outcome is going to look like. So process that with them in advance. I think it's really good for parents to ask them questions, like simple questions, like, what are you looking forward to? What is something you're not sure about? What is something I can help you with, during this transition. But yeah, I really think that kids need to be involved in all of that.
So let's say in a scenario where it's good when you have like a heads up to what you're going to do, right? But sometimes we don't have a heads up and things just happen and you just have to move, right? And especially in our current situation where things are a little uncertain and hey, we have to pack up, we have to move cities, or we have to change houses, or hey, we're pregnant, there's a new baby coming. So in those times where it's just maybe too less of a time gap, or and let's say the kids are not too keen on it, right? Then how do we manage that? How would you suggest? What would you suggest?
If they're not too keen on the transition?
They're not too keen on the transition, yes.
Yeah, maybe just asking them what's the thing that's holding them back, and change is hard, and reminding them that too. And also, I think this is a great opportunity for parents to also say, this is hard for me too, or it's hard for me to move into a new flat also, or, but the great thing is we get to meet new friends. We still get to keep those old friends that we did meet. And I'm so grateful that you did. We will continue that. But however, this is such a great way for you to meet new friends and making life more adventurous for them, to where then giving them, helping them see that There's so much more to look forward to, but also acknowledging that it is hard. Change is hard. And also saying this is hard for me too, but I'm excited about, whatever it is the parent can list out. Remember that whatever the parent communicates is what the child will pick up on. So if a parent is excited about it, a child, it's okay. They're anxious about it and not sure about it, but they eventually will step into whatever the parent is feeling.
Yeah. So allowing them, like leading them through that process and acknowledging what they're feeling, and sort of leading them through the positives of what's going to happen.
Yeah. And also talking to them, what are their what if questions? Like, do you have any what if questions for me? Like I love these what if questions. What would you do if, we didn't have this or we didn't get to do this? Like, let them ask you whatever they want. And to your best ability, you answer them. And it's okay to say, I really don't know, what the answer to that is, but let's find out, and this is going to be good. And maybe even asking them, what is something that you want to keep from this place that will remind them of, of the place, or taking pictures, whatever it is, and in this city, children are pretty resilient, which is great, and traffic is the only thing that holds us back from revisiting something, that's the only thing. But but I think children needs to be heard, and affirmed for what they feel.
Yeah. A few more like decision-making processes I'm feeling, like maybe change of school. It could be even like maybe, especially in this time, if you've been working from home and now you're actually going back to physical, work, or maybe you've been a stay-at-home parent and now you're going back to work. And we may feel like, hey, this is okay, this is part of life, but sometimes it's a huge transition for children. And so to be able to get them on board in the decision-making process would actually be easier for them and for you, right? Thank you, Cheryl. So even as we close today, what would be some things that you would encourage parents who are watching us right now?
So here are 3 tips that I think is really important when it comes to raising your kids is take ownership of when you did or said something. It's really important that we model teaching children on how to apologize when they messed up or did something they were not supposed to do. So it's important that as a parent, we need to model that first. Second is understand the child's emotion and help them to be aware of what they are feeling. Like we talked about earlier, help them to identify that specific emotion that they may be expressing. So help them with that. And third, throughout the day, make sure you affirm them, telling them you're proud of them, that you love them. They need to hear that. The more you say that, the more connected they feel to you. And remember, parents, I think all parents need to be aware that there is no parent that is an expert on parenting altogether. You become an expert on your own child and in your own family, then you'll have a successful parenting. And so be very involved, be very engaged with your children, and just focus on being an amazing mom and an amazing dad for your child, not for anyone else. So do the best you can, and parenting is just winging it. So do the best you can. I think the most important thing in raising children is paying attention to them, care about their emotions, sit with them, talk to them, engage in conversations with them. The other thing is, don't beat yourself up if you don't have it together. It's okay, but be more aware of what you're feeling and talk to other moms or other dads about, and surround yourself with other families that you can talk to. And it takes a village to raise all of our kids. So I think it's important that we surround ourselves with other parents that, that we can process things with. So I think that's what I would say. It's okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for your time and for doing this with us. Truly grateful.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.